Hi, everyone. The other week, I was talking to a friend, a parent who was trying to help his child find an appropriate mate and wanted some friendly support and perspective while he was in the Parsha. I'm not sure I know your child, I told him. What can you tell me about the child and the qualities your kids look for in friends in general? He quickly responded, "This shouldn't be so hard. My kid is your average, normal, frum Jewish 20 something looking for your average, normal Jewish 20 something." And that's when I think I discovered his problem and his frustration point. You see, there's a huge difference between average and normal. And the place we find it most obviously, and not surprisingly, is in the Parsha. After instructing us about the Yom Kippur Avoda service in the Beis Hamikdash, a service that was anything but normal and average, and is timed after the death of Nadav and Avihu, who, at least according to one source, met their untimely death because they didn't marry, the Torah introduces us to the section of Arayos, of forbidden relationships. The Torah introduces that section with the following preliminary direction. Kemasei eretz Mitzrayim asher yeshavtem ba lo sa'asu. You must not imitate the practices of the land of Egypt where you dwelt. Ukemasei eretz Canaan asher ani mevi eschem shama lo sa'asu. And you also shouldn't imitate the practices of the land of Canaan to which I'm bringing you. Now, why is the introduction to the section of forbidden relationships introduced with references to the land we lived in the past and the one we're heading toward? Why are the two separated also? Just let the Torah direct us not to follow the lands of Egypt and Canaan. Why this lengthy distinction? Moreover, why does the Torah highlight the practice of the lands of Mitzrayim and Canaan as opposed to the practices of the Anshe Mitzrayim v'Canaan, the people of the lands? Isn't it they, not the land, that we're being cautioned not to emulate? Perhaps the explanation of these moral laws can be explained by a simple understanding of the difference between average and normal. When students want to be doing well as the average student in a class, technically, they're aiming at a course grade of C. And that doesn't really sit very well with most of them when they consider the wording, because the average is a computation of where one is and mathematically describes that picture. If the class is a lower scoring one, being average in it is really nothing to be excited about. And when we are not talking about classes, but rather societies instead of classes, then the one who strives to be your average society member in a low class society will be a low class person. And so, hence, the Torah cautions us that even if we're in a society that's morally bankrupt and has lowered expectations of its members, we can't be okay being average there. Rashi notes that both Mitzrayim and Canaan were the most degenerate, most immoral areas of the world in their time. And Rav Yosef Patsanovsky added that a Jew needs to know that where society is terrible on average, we do not have a right to turn to Hashem and say, well, we're living or we're swayed to be immoral, because that's where we were placed. Rav Chaim Yaakov Govach Zatzal added that in societies like these, like a Mitzrayim, like a Canaan, like a debased society in general, we not only have a responsibility to be distinct to everyone else by being different, we have to be distinct in our own expectations of ourselves as well. It's not to the people that we cannot follow. We can't even excuse ourselves from having higher standards than the land, the Torah cautions. I believe it was Rabbi Dr. Norman Lamb who noted that if we insist on the law of average as a standard for our lives, then life becomes meaningless and even ludicrous. He noted that in population at large, there are some people who also have only one leg. Some, Rahman al-Itzlan, have none. So the average man or woman has 1.9 legs. However, the normal for humans is to have 2 legs. Now, if average and normal are synonymous, then people should be rushing to contribute an inch of their legs to conform to society. If average is normal, then we need to discourage and ultimately banish hard work and genius, which stands 2 whole standard deviations away from average. That's an approach that we can say it's nuts. Frankly, it's not normal. And if it's normalcy that we seek in physical and intellectual pursuits, then why should it be any different in the realm of morality? Morals cannot simply be left to be decided by the average or the covenantal or conventional society. Indeed, Rav Yaakov Ettlinger notes that the Torah introduced us to morality not based on the average person in the society we may have come from and been influenced by, as we might have been coming from a very rich, a very influential Egyptian society, nor can it be based on a new society like the one of Canaan, which is where we were heading to. Instead, Rav Yaakov Ettlinger points out, our morality and ethics need to be based on being normal, which is defined in the Torah as to the ideal expectation of what a Jew is supposed to be and stand for. And this standard of normal has helped us navigate life and has remained unchanged throughout the centuries, through settlement and exile, through good times and bad, through adulation of the Jew and persecution. But the normal ethic of Torah life has helped us withstand the pressures of a compromised society and morality. Rav Shlomo Volbo points out that in the places of the most crass of behaviors that are the most oppositional to Judaism, we often find the strongest adherence to Jewish principles by our Jews themselves. And Rav Volbo explains that every Jew, no matter his level of observance, has a spark of Kedusha, of holiness, that pervades him or her and everything he or she does, which is antithetical to Tumah. So when facing the Tumah of society, Rav Volbo says, we tend to double our personal efforts as long as we distinguish ourselves from the morality around us. Rav Shmuel Alevi Vosner adds that the problems begin when we enter our own moral societies, whether in the land of Israel or among our own circles worldwide. When among ourselves, with all of our diversity, challenges to morality and ethics come from within. And at these times, it's no less important, and according to Rav Vosner, even more important, to not make the law based on averages. Modern movements in Judaism have argued that since the Torah principles are not kept, then the moral imperative it espouses loses its validity. Frankly, we'd all likely find that argument laughable if it wasn't blasphemous. But even closer to home, our ethical imperatives in the realm of Lashon Hara or Bein Adam L'Chaveiro are sometimes disregarded by many in our ranks who note that they aren't observed scrupulously by the average frum person. Yet others note that while they worry about Bein Adam L'Chaveiro above all, their observance of Hashem's expectations and moral standards, Bein Adam L'Makom, are not as much of concern to the average person in their neighborhood community. Both approaches can't be allowed to reign. If our community's average observance is low, then it's our business to know our complete ethical and moral imperative and to make that average rise until it becomes the normal that the Torah expects from us. Torah standards are not clay that can be molded and changed to fit our tastes and conduct. It's we who are expected to shape ourselves to meet the ethics of the Torah, b'chai bohem, and to live by those principles and standards, and to thrive. This is my point to my friend about his quest for a normal, average match. The truth is, there's no such thing. There never was. There's only a choice to define ourselves by what happens to be common around us, or to define ourselves by what's eternally true. A normal Jew is not one who blends into the crowd, but rather one who aligns with the Ratzon Hashem. In a world that constantly publishes its averages, average values, average standards, average commitments, the Torah whispers something far more demanding and far more dignified. The Torah tells us be normal. Not statistically normal, but spiritually normal. Not what's common, but what's correct. Not what's popular, but what's principled. And that's not only a message for the extremes of society, for Mitzrayim or Canaan, it's a message for our own homes, our own shuls, our own batei medrash, our own communities. because the most dangerous place to drift into average is precisely where we feel most comfortable, among ourselves. When everybody's doing it, becomes a heter. It's not so bad becomes a standard. When subtle erosion replaces conscious decision, that's a danger. Am I speaking the way that the Torah defines as proper, or the way people around me tend to speak? Am I conducting my business, my relationships, my inner life according to what's expected of me, or what's excused by others? You know, it's a shift from comparison to commitment. Yeah, and it's demanding, but it's also profoundly empowering. Because when a person stops chasing the average, he's no longer limited by it. He's no longer dragged down by a weak environment or lulled by a complacent one. He becomes anchored to something stable, to something that doesn't fluctuate with trends or pressures. That's right. A Jew doesn't strive to fit in, he stands up. We don't strive to be average in a broken world. No, my dear friends, our goal is to be normal as defined by the Torah. Wishing you and yours a Shabbat Shalom and a Shabbat Shalom to all.